The square smelled of smoke and fear. Rain drizzled softly over the crowd, hissing against the torches that lined the wooden platform at its center. Rough voices rose in excitement, laughter, jeers, the kind that made Elara's skin crawl. The sheriff had promised a spectacle tonight, and the townsfolk had come hungry for blood. And there, at the center of it all, knelt the spectacle himself. A man, if he could still be called one, shackled in iron, skin streaked with blood and mud, yet somehow still holding himself upright like a king refusing to kneel. Even beaten and bound, he radiated something fierce, something untamed. Elara told herself she shouldn't care. She'd come only to see what became of those who defied the king's soldiers, not to get involved. She had nothing left to give. But then the prisoner lifted his head. Silver eyes, bright and wild, even in the rain, locked onto hers across the square. The air around her shifted, the world narrowing until it was just him and her and the thin veil of rain between. Her heart stuttered. Those eyes didn't belong to a man. They belonged to something older, wilder. "Step lively," barked Sheriff Rowan, yanking the chain at the prisoner's throat. The man didn't resist. He only watched, silent as a storm waiting to break. "Behold," Rowan shouted to the crowd, "a northern beast caught trespassing on sacred land. The king's justice demands payment, and so he'll be sold to the highest bidder." The words rippled through the crowd, feeding their excitement. "How much for the monster?" someone called. "I'll pay a silver to see him fight." Laughter. Another shouted, "He's strong, but not for long. Look at him. Half dead already." Elara bit her lip. The prisoner swayed slightly on his knees. He was enormous, taller than any man she'd seen, yet she could see it now. His strength was fading fast. Rowan grinned like a vulture. 10 silver to start. "We'll take him." No answer. 5 then. "Come now, look at him. Strong as an ox." Still silence. And that was when she saw it. The faint smoke rising where the iron met his skin. The shackles weren't just binding him. They were burning him. Her stomach turned cold. She'd heard the rumors whispered in the dark about the Highland clans who could take the form of wolves, alphas who ruled by blood and moonlight. Silver was their bane. If that was true, then this man wasn't a criminal. He was cursed. Rowan scowled, scanning the crowd. 3 silver, then. A bargain for a beast like this. Another rock flew, striking the prisoner's shoulder. The man didn't cry out, but his jaw tightened, and his eyes, God's help her, flicked back to Elara again. She couldn't look away. Something in that gaze felt like recognition. Like he knew her, though she was certain she'd never seen him before. And then she saw the spreading black across his chest, the wound that glowed faintly beneath torn fabric, veins dark as ink. A poison eating its way toward his heart. "He's dying," she realized. Her breath caught. The crowd laughed. The sheriff called for bids again, but all she heard was the rasp of the prisoner's breathing. 2 silver. Rowan barked. 2. "I'll take him," she said. The words burst out before she could stop them. The square went silent. Dozens of faces turned toward her. The poor healer's daughter, the woman who'd already lost everything. A ripple of disbelief ran through the crowd. The sheriff blinked. "You'll what?" 2 silver coins, she said again, louder this time. "You said final offer." A snicker rolled through the gathered townsfolk. "She's mad. What'll she do with a beast like that? Feed him soup." Elara ignored them. She stepped forward, pulling 2 worn coins from her pouch, her last 2. The sound of metal against metal was small, almost pitiful against the laughter that followed. "Please," she said quietly, "let me take him." The sheriff studied her, his lip curling in disdain. You don't have the means to keep a man like him alive. I only mean to keep him from dying here, she said. He hesitated, then snatched the coins from her palm. So be it. He's yours, fool girl. When he rips your throat out, don't say I didn't warn you. The guards released the shackles. The chains fell with a hiss of smoke, and the prisoner drew his first unbound breath, ragged, deep, almost animal. He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. Those eyes, gods, those eyes found her again. Elara hesitated, then stepped forward and offered her hand. Can you walk? She asked. He stared at her outstretched palm, as if the gesture itself was something foreign. Then, carefully, he reached out. His hand engulfed hers, warm, calloused, trembling. The moment their skin touched, something flared between them. A pulse, like fire meeting frost. She gasped softly. It felt wrong and right all at once, like lightning in her blood. He said something in a language she didn't know, deep, rumbling, reverent. Whatever it meant, it made the crowd quiet. As she helped him down from the platform, the air seemed to hum around them, as though the world itself had gone still to watch. And in that moment, a question crossed her mind, unbidden, terrifying, true. What would you have done, standing there in the rain? Would you have looked away or reached out too? The thought lingered, whispering against her heart as the prisoner stumbled beside her. At the edge of the square, she turned to him, meaning to offer comfort. You're safe now, she murmured. He looked at her with those impossible eyes and spoke a single word, low, guttural, claiming. Mine. The sound wasn't a threat. It was a vow. And before she could draw another breath, the great Alpha collapsed forward, his weight knocking her into the mud, his heartbeat slowing beneath her hands as the silver burned through his veins. She'd saved him. But as she stared at the dying man in her arms, rain washing the blood from his skin, she couldn't shake the shiver that whispered through her soul. It felt like she'd just sealed her fate, too. The rain hadn't stopped by the time Elara dragged the man home. Every step from the square to her cottage felt heavier than the last. He leaned against her with a weight that would have crushed her if not for sheer will, and perhaps something else, that strange current she'd felt when their skin first touched. It burned in her veins now, hot and electric, like a secret she didn't yet understand. You're almost there, she whispered, though her voice trembled more than she'd have liked. Just hold on. Her cottage sat at the far edge of the village, half hidden by the trees. The kind of place people visited only when they were desperate for her remedies, and where the sheriff never bothered to look too closely. Smoke curled from the small chimney, a fragile sign of warmth in the cold gray dusk. As they crossed the threshold, the man's knees gave out completely. Elara grunted under the sudden weight, lowering him to the wooden floor beside the hearth. His breath came in ragged gasps, his skin fever-hot to the touch. She tore away the remnants of his shirt and bit back a cry. The wound over his heart was unlike anything she'd seen. Black veins spidered out from the puncture, shimmering faintly beneath the skin. And beneath it, God's help her, something pulsed, as if the poison itself were alive. Sweet stars, she whispered. What have they done to you? He didn't answer, of course. His eyes were half closed, lashes dark against his bruised skin, his chest rising shallowly. But when she brushed a strand of wet hair from his face, he turned slightly toward her touch, a faint, unconscious movement that stole her breath. Elara fetched her herbs from the shelves, crushed willow bark for fever, yarrow for cleansing, a draught of ground silverleaf for the infection. She worked quickly, trying to silence the panic clawing at her throat. Not like father, she muttered to herself, remembering another night, another fever she hadn't been able to break. Not again. I can save him. I have to. The firelight painted the room in gold and amber. She dipped a cloth into hot water and began cleaning the wound. The moment the damp fabric touched his skin, the black veins recoiled, retreating for a heartbeat before pushing back, angrier, darker. Elara flinched. "That's not right," she whispered. She pressed harder. The veins pulsed violently, and a low growl rumbled from the man's throat. His hand shot up, catching her wrist in an iron grip. Elara froze. His eyes were open again, not silver now, but molten gold, glowing faintly in the firelight. For a breathless moment, she couldn't move, couldn't even think. Then, just as suddenly, his grip loosened, his hand falling limply back to the floor. The gold faded to gray-blue, and his breathing slowed once more. Elara exhaled shakily. "What are you?" she murmured. "And what have I brought into my home?" Outside, thunder rolled across the hills, the kind that came from the northern mountains, where the clans still whispered of spirits and wolves. The kind that always made her wonder what truth lay beneath the old tales. She had grown up on those stories, her grandmother's voice murmuring by candlelight. "There are men who wear two skins, Elara, the wild and the human. When the moon claims them, they remember what they are." Elara had laughed then, too young to understand. But as she looked at the unconscious man on her floor, something deep inside her stirred, something that whispered that her grandmother's stories hadn't been stories at all. She sat beside him through the night, changing the cloths, watching his fever rise and fall like the tide. At some point, exhaustion claimed her. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, the fire had burned low, and dawn light was spilling through the cracks in the shutters. The man was watching her. His eyes, that impossible silver, met hers, sharp and aware now. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. It should have frightened her, but it didn't. It felt like being seen for the first time. "You're awake," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. He said something in that liquid, musical tongue, soft, questioning. His voice was lower than before, rough like stone against silk. "I don't understand you," she said gently, "but you're safe here." He frowned, then glanced down at the bandages across his chest, at the herbs laid out beside the hearth. When his gaze returned to her, it was softer somehow. Curious. Elara hesitated. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked, gesturing to herself. "Elara." He studied her, then placed a hand over his heart, over the wound she'd tended, and spoke a single word. "Ronan." She repeated it quietly. Ronan. The name fit him, strong, ancient, like something carved from the mountains themselves. He smiled faintly, and it changed his face entirely. For one dangerous heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. He tried to sit up and hissed in pain. Elara was beside him instantly.
"No.
Don't move. The poison hasn't cleared yet." He stared at her hands as they pressed against his shoulder, small, delicate, but steady. When she looked up again, he was still watching her. His gaze lingered on her mouth, her eyes, her throat, as though memorizing her. Something unspoken passed between them then. Recognition, gratitude, and something else, hunger. Elara's pulse quickened. She withdrew her hand, flustered. "Rest," she said firmly. "That's an order." Ronan didn't understand the words, but the tone made him chuckle, a low, rough sound that wrapped around her like smoke. The kind of laugh that promised danger. Later, when he slept again, she sat by the hearth, staring into the fire. Her thoughts drifted back to the night before, the moment in the square when he'd looked at her, the way her chest had burned when he said that single word.
Mine.
Would you have stopped to help him? She wondered, tracing the edge of her cup. Would anyone else have risked everything for a stranger who didn't even seem human? Maybe she was mad. Maybe everyone in the village was right about her. But as she glanced toward the sleeping Alpha, the faint rise and fall of his chest steady and strong now, she realized she'd do it all again without hesitation. That night, she dreamed of silver eyes glowing beneath a blood moon, of a forest whispering her name, and of a voice low, familiar, promising, murmuring against her skin. You saved me, little one, now you belong to me. By the third night, the fever had broken. Elara could feel it the moment she entered the cottage. The air was different, charged, alive. The candles burned steadier. The herb sheet hung from the rafters no longer wilted beneath whatever dark poison had filled the room. And the man, Ronan, was no longer pale and trembling. He was standing. By the firelight, his form filled the small space, broad-shouldered, tall enough that he had to duck beneath the low beams. The blanket she'd given him had fallen to his waist, leaving his back bare, and God's help her, he looked like he'd been carved by the same wild hands that shaped the mountains. Elara froze in the doorway, her breath catching. You shouldn't be up, she said quietly, her voice barely steady. Ronan turned. Those silver eyes, now fully awake, fixed on her with a heat that made the air feel thin. He spoke softly, the words flowing like water. She couldn't understand them, but the tone was unmistakable, command wrapped in concern. He stepped closer, and Elara instinctively backed away until her shoulders brushed the doorframe. I told you to rest, she said again, but it came out softer this time, less like a warning and more like a plea. He stopped only a breath away. She could smell him, pine, smoke, and something darker, something wild. His gaze dropped to her throat, and she realized he was listening to her heartbeat. The silence stretched, long and fragile. Then he said something that sounded like her name. Elara. The way he spoke it, reverent low, made her heart twist. He lifted a hand, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. His fingers lingered at her jaw, tracing lightly until they reached the faint pulse beneath her skin. Her breath shuddered. I don't know what you're doing, she whispered, though she didn't move away. He murmured another word, mine. But this time, it wasn't the rough, feral growl from the auction. It was tender.
Certain.
She should have been terrified. Every story she'd ever heard about the Northern Alphas warned of what they did to those who saved them. Blood debts, life bonds, old laws that tied souls tighter than chains. But when his hand moved from her throat to her shoulder, she found herself leaning into the touch, not resisting it. For a heartbeat, the world was nothing but that, his warmth, her breath, the storm building quietly between them. Then the door banged open. Elara. She jumped, tearing away from him. It was Myra, her neighbor, wide-eyed, soaked from the rain. The sheriff's men are out again, she gasped. They're asking questions about the northern prisoner, say he vanished after the auction. Elara's blood went cold. She looked at Ronan, who now stood perfectly still, eyes narrowed, every line of his body coiled. They'll come here, Myra warned. You need to hide him. I'll manage, Elara stammered, ushering the woman out before she could step further inside. When the door shut again, she turned to Ronan. You need to stay hidden, do you understand? If they find you... But he was already moving. His hand found her wrist, firm but gentle. He spoke quickly in that foreign tongue, his eyes searching hers for understanding. I don't, she began, but he lifted her hand and pressed it against his chest, over the faint scar of the wound she'd healed. His heart beat strong beneath her palm, steady and powerful. He spoke one word again. Bond. She frowned. Bond. He nodded once, eyes never leaving hers. Then he moved his hand to her chest, just above her heart, and whispered something that sounded almost like a prayer. Heat spread beneath his touch. For a dizzy second, she thought it was her imagination, until the warmth turned to fire. "Ronan," she breathed, trembling. A flicker of light pulsed from where his hand met her skin, faint, golden, like the shimmer of moonlight in water. The same glow she'd seen in his veins the night he collapsed. "What are you doing to me?" she whispered. He looked pained, torn, but didn't pull away. "Not do," he said haltingly. "Happen." She felt it then, not just heat, but something else. A rhythm. A heartbeat that wasn't hers, echoing faintly in her chest. It took her a moment to realize it matched the beat beneath her palm. His heart. Her heart. The same pulse. Elara stumbled back, clutching at her chest.
No.
No, that's not possible. Ronan caught her before she could fall, one arm steadying her as he murmured something soothing. But she barely heard him. Every nerve in her body was alive, trembling. She could feel him, not just beside her, but inside her, his emotions bleeding faintly into her own.
Worry.
Relief. A fierce, protective need that made her knees weak. "What did you do to me?" she whispered again, but this time, the question sounded less like accusation and more like awe. He hesitated, struggling for words, then said softly, "Life for life. You save me, now we bound." Her breath caught. Bound. He nodded. Alpha. Mate. The world tilted. She'd heard of such things in tales. The ancient bond of the alpha and his chosen, a connection forged not by choice, but by fate. It was said to happen rarely, when one saved the life of one marked by the moon. The price of such salvation was always the same, a tie that could not be broken. "Mate," she echoed, the word tasting foreign, dangerous, sacred. He touched her face again, this time with trembling reverence. "Mine," he whispered, the word no longer a claim of ownership, but of recognition. Something inside her answered before her mind could stop it, a pull that sang through her blood, ancient and impossible. Her breath came in a soft, shuddering sigh. "What if I don't want this?" Ronan's expression changed. He stepped back immediately, eyes filled with something that might have been pain. He bowed his head, slow, deliberate, and said in a voice thick with emotion, "Then I walk, but bonds still live." He turned toward the door. Elara's chest ached. She could feel his sorrow in the hollow space it left, an echo that wasn't her own. When he opened the door, the night wind rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and pine, and of him, fading with each step. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling both heartbeats falter. If fate tied you to someone in one instant, someone wild, dangerous, and utterly unknown, would you fight it? Or would you follow the pull, even knowing it could break you? The question haunted her long after he vanished into the dark. The rain had stopped by morning, but Elara's world had not found its balance again. The cottage felt wrong without him in it. The hearth burned too quietly, the air too still. She could almost feel the echo he'd left behind, as if the walls themselves remembered the sound of his breath. Every time she closed her eyes, her chest pulsed with that borrowed rhythm, the faint double beat that told her Ronan was alive, somewhere close. She tried to work, to lose herself in the comfort of habit. The sick still came to her door, a mother with her fevered child, an old shepherd with a bad leg, and Elara mixed tinctures and salves as she always had. But now, every sound from the forest made her hands pause mid-motion. And sometimes, when she stepped outside to fetch water, she caught the faintest trace of him on the wind, pine, smoke, and something wilder that curled through her senses like memory. "Stop it," she whispered to herself one afternoon, wiping her hands on her apron.
He's gone.
He chose to walk away. Yet the words rang hollow. Because at night, when the moon rose and silvered the world, she felt him. Not in body, in blood. His emotions whispered through her veins, faint and far off but real, a flash of anger, a jolt of fear, the deep, restless pull of longing that was not entirely her own. It frightened her, this sharing of feeling. It also comforted her in a way she couldn't explain. That evening, as she checked the drying herbs by the window, a shadow moved at the edge of the trees. Elara's breath caught. She leaned forward, but before she could call out, a knock sounded at her door. 3 sharp raps. Familiar. Measured. She froze. Not him. Ronan would never knock. Elara. Sheriff Rowan's voice cut through the quiet. Open up in the king's name. Her heart slammed once, twice. She opened the door only a crack. What is it you want, Sheriff? Rowan's eyes narrowed. Behind him stood 2 soldiers in the crimson cloaks of the crown. You know well what I want. The northern prisoner you bought. The beast disappeared. Some say you hid him here. He's gone, Elara said evenly. He left the night after the auction. I had no say in it. Rowan's gaze slid past her shoulder. Mind if we look for ourselves? She stepped sideways, blocking the doorway. I mind very much. This is my home. For a heartbeat he hesitated, then smiled, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Careful, girl. Defying the crown carries a price. Elara's hands clenched behind her apron. She felt heat bloom beneath her skin, that strange spark she'd first felt when Ronan touched her. The air shimmered faintly between them, and Rowan's smile faltered, as if a sudden chill had cut through him. Be quick about your business, she said softly. Or leave. Something in her voice made him step back. We'll be watching you, witch, he muttered, then turned away. The word hit her like a blow.
Witch.
The same name they'd whispered about her mother. When the soldiers vanished down the path, Elara shut the door and pressed her palms to her face. Her pulse raced, hers and his, tangled together. Ronan, she breathed. Where are you? The answer came in a rush of sensation, so sudden it drove her to her knees. Cold air, pine needles under bare feet, the metallic tang of blood. For an instant she saw through his eyes, a glimpse of torchlight on armor, the flash of silver blades. Then it was gone. She staggered upright, heart pounding. He was fighting, and he was close. Without thinking, she snatched her cloak from the peg and bolted into the forest. The night swallowed her instantly, damp earth sucking at her boots, branches clawing her cloak. The bond pulled her onward, an invisible thread tugging at her ribs. Each step brought the rhythm of his heart stronger, faster, until she burst into a clearing lit by a flickering torch left half buried in mud. There, movement among the trees. 2 soldiers dragging something heavy. A man. Elara's breath caught. Even bloodied and bound again, she knew him. Ronan. The soldiers spun, startled. By the crown. She's here. Elara didn't think. The heat in her chest flared white-hot, rushing down her arms. She raised a hand, and the torch flame leapt, roaring higher, twisting from the ground as if answering her call. The soldiers cried out, stumbling back as fire circled them in a sudden wall. She didn't understand what she'd done, only that the light obeyed her. The next instant, strong hands seized her shoulders. Ronan's. His shackles hung broken. The firelight danced across his eyes, no longer human but molten gold. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her, then at the fire she'd called. Awe and recognition mingled in his gaze. You come, he said roughly. Feel me. She swallowed. I saw you. I felt you. He nodded once. Bond true. Before she could answer, he caught her hand and pulled her into the forest. They ran until the torches vanished behind them, until only moonlight guided their path. When they finally stopped beside the river, both gasped for breath, though Ronan recovered faster, already scanning the trees. "They hunt me still," he said, the words thick with his accent. "King want Alpha dead." Elara stared at him, trembling. "You can speak my tongue. Learn fast," he said, almost apologetic. "Need to warn you." He touched his chest. "Bond make you target too." "Me?" He nodded grimly. "They smell my mark on you." Alara's pulse jumped. The faint burn at her throat where he'd touched her that first night seemed to flare again. She turned away, staring at the dark river. "So saving you has doomed me." He moved closer until his reflection merged with hers on the water's surface. "No," he said softly. "Saving me woke you." She looked up sharply. "Woke me?" Ronan met her gaze. "Magic in you. Old kind. Same as wolves. That why bond hold." The words settled between them like falling ash. It explained the fire, the heat, the strange pulse of energy that had scared the sheriff away. But it also terrified her. "No," she whispered. "I'm just a healer." He smiled faintly, sad, knowing. "Healer, which, wolf blood, same root. You heal because wild listens." She wanted to deny it, yet the forest itself seemed to hum in response, leaves trembling though the air was still. The truth sat heavy and bright in her chest. If the wild called your name, would you answer? Or would you hide from it until it destroyed you? The thought wasn't hers alone. It was both of theirs, shared across the bond like a single heartbeat. Ronan's hand found hers again. "We must run north," he said. "To my kin. Only there you safe." Elara's gaze drifted to the lights of the village far below, her home, her mother's grave. Everything she knew lay behind her. By the time dawn touched the highlands, they had climbed beyond the last village path. Mist rolled low through the heather, and every sound seemed sharper up here. The cry of hawks, the quick rhythm of two hearts that beat almost as one. Elara's cloak was torn, her hands raw, but she said nothing. Ronan moved ahead of her with silent certainty, every step purposeful. He carried the weight of command even in exhaustion. When he turned back to help her across a stream, she almost refused out of stubborn pride, until his hand brushed hers and the bond hummed, easing her fatigue like a whispered promise. They followed the river north until the hills folded into a valley. A half-ruined stone keep rose from the fog. Moss covered its walls. Ivy claimed its towers. Ronan slowed, eyes distant. "My home," he said quietly. "Before the war." Elara studied the ruins. "This is where you came from?" He nodded. "Where they cursed me." He led her through a broken archway into a hall open to the sky. Charred beams jutted like ribs. At the center stood an ancient altar of dark stone, carved with runes that pulsed faintly under the morning light. Elara traced one with her fingertips. The symbol glowed, warm beneath her skin. Ronan's voice broke the silence. "They feared what we are. Not beasts, guardians. The crown wanted our blood for power. My pack fought, many died. I was taken used." He looked at her, the grief stark in his silver eyes. "You saw the mark on my chest. That was their doing." Elara's throat tightened. "And I freed you." "You freed what they bound," he said. "But the binding left its mark. The curse does not end, it moves." She frowned. "Moves?" He reached for her wrist, turning it gently. A faint shimmer ran beneath her skin, a thread of light, almost invisible. "Part of it now lives in you." She jerked back. "No," but even as she denied it, the bond flared, a quick, aching pull that made her chest throb in rhythm with his. Ronan's expression softened. Do not fear it. It makes you stronger. Stronger? She laughed once, brittle. They'll call me witch again. They'll burn me if they see this. He stepped closer until the space between them vanished. Then we teach you to hide or to fight. Elara wanted to look away, yet his eyes held her. The warmth that spread through her was not just magic, it was something painfully human. She realized then that the bond was more than fate's trick. It was choice, the choice she kept making over and over, to stand beside him. He reached up, brushing his thumb across her jaw. I thought my kind could not feel this again. What? Peace, he murmured. Hope. The words undid her. She leaned into his touch, the breath between them shortening until it was a shared thing. When he bent his head, she didn't stop him. His lips brushed hers, light, hesitant, and the world stilled. Then pain ripped through them both. Ronan staggered back with a shout, clutching his chest. A crimson light flared from the wound that had long since healed. Elara cried out, falling to her knees as the same fire seared across her sternum. Images flooded her mind. A golden hall, a crown of iron, a sorcerer's voice chanting. A cup filled with Ronan's blood. A spell spoken over it. Bind the alpha, bind the moon. And then, her own face reflected in that same cup centuries later. When the vision released her, she gasped for air. I saw it, she whispered. The one who cursed you, the king's mage. He used your blood. Ronan's breath came hard. Then he will come for you now. The curse needs a vessel. When it left me, it sought you. Elara stared at him, realization dawning. That's why they hunted you. They don't want you dead. They want your power reborn in someone they can control. And now they know where it went. From the valley below came the faint clang of distant armor. Elara turned toward the sound, her stomach twisting. They've found us. Ronan drew himself up, the wildness returning to his eyes. We run to the high caves. My kin hide there still. But Elara caught his arm. Wait. The light beneath her skin still pulsed, softer now, answering his. If the curse came from your blood, maybe we can break it with mine. Ronan shook his head. To break it, you must survive it. I will not risk you. She met his gaze steadily. You already have. For a moment he said nothing, then a reluctant smile curved his mouth. Stubborn healer. Always. He looked toward the approaching glimmer of torches. We will need both courage and cunning. When they come, follow my lead. She nodded, though fear churned inside her. The bond hummed, steadying her again, the twin beat of two hearts facing the same danger. As they prepared to flee, a strange calm settled over Elara. She realized that the life she'd left, the quiet cottage, the empty evenings, felt smaller than this moment. Whatever happened next, she was done hiding from the wild within her. Would you have turned back then, knowing what waited ahead? Or would you have stepped into the unknown, trusting a bond you couldn't explain? The question echoed through her mind as Ronan took her hand and led her toward the mountains, their joined pulse quick and sure against the rising dawn. The mountain paths were a maze of stone and shadow. Wind howled through the ravines, carrying the scent of snow and iron. Elara's breath came in bursts, each one visible in the freezing air. She followed Ronan's shape ahead of her, a dark blur against the gray slope, her boots slipping on the scree. Behind them, the faint clang of pursuit still echoed, the king's soldiers, relentless as the curse itself. Keep close, Ronan said without turning. I'm trying, she gasped. The bond between them thrummed, urging her onward even when her body screamed to stop. It was more than adrenaline. It was the shared will of survival. His heartbeat drove hers forward. At last he slowed, pulling her beneath an overhang where the rock bent inward like the ribs of some ancient beast. A narrow crevice led deeper, into darkness.
Here, he said.
The caves. They slipped inside. The air was cool and dry, smelling of earth and ash. Elara sank to her knees, pressing a hand to her chest as their joined pulses steadied. Ronan crouched beside her. You hurt. Only tired. She looked up at him. They won't stop, will they? No, his expression softened. Until one of us falls. He reached out, brushing mud from her cheek with his thumb. The gesture was almost tender, but behind it, she could feel his fear. The bond laid it bare between them. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for her. We can't keep running forever, she said. There has to be a way to end this. Ronan stared into the dark. There is. The bloodstone altar. He nodded toward the deeper passage. Old magic. Made to bind or break. But it demands sacrifice. Elara's stomach nodded. Whose? He didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. They rested for a while, the only sound their breathing and the faint drip of water somewhere in the depths. She leaned against the cave wall, exhaustion dragging her eyelids down. When she woke, the fire Ronan had built was nearly out, and he was gone. Ronan. Her voice echoed softly. No reply. She rose, heart pounding. The bond felt muted, distant, as if a veil had fallen between them. Fear prickled up her spine. She followed the tunnel deeper until it opened into a vast cavern lit by the dull red glow of molten stone. Ronan stood at the altar, a slab of obsidian carved with the same runes she'd seen in the ruins. He held a dagger of black glass in one hand, the other pressed to his chest where the wound once was. What are you doing? She demanded. He turned, the firelight catching the faint shimmer of tears in his eyes. Ending it. The curse dies with me. No. She ran forward, grabbing his wrist. You said there had to be another way. There isn't, he said quietly. If I live, they'll keep hunting. If I die, the bond will fade. You'll be free. Her grip tightened. Free? You think that's what I want? Elara, his voice broke on her name. You were never meant to bear this. I should have let the chains kill me. The pain in her chest flared until she could barely breathe. She realized what he didn't. The bond wasn't one-sided anymore. His death would take her with him. She shook her head fiercely. If you die, I die too. He froze.
No.
I took it from you. Not all of it. She pressed his hand to her heart, where the faint light still pulsed beneath her skin. You said it yourself. The curse moved. You can't kill one half without killing the other. Ronan's expression crumbled. Then I've doomed you. Not yet, she said. We break it together. He stared at her for a long time, and something in his eyes changed, the despair giving way to a flicker of hope. Together, he echoed. They placed their hands on the altar, fingers entwined. The runes flared bright red, the heat searing through their palms. Pain lanced through Elara's chest, but beneath it she felt a strange clarity, a voice not hers whispering through the flame. Blood binds. Love releases. She understood then. The curse had been forged in domination, in fear. It could only be broken by the opposite. Ronan, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. You have to trust me. I do. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. The world narrowed to the rhythm of their shared heartbeats. When she kissed him, the fire exploded outward, blinding and pure. The bond surged, light pouring from their joined hands into the runes, then shattering upward in a rain of sparks. For a heartbeat, she felt everything, his memories, his pain, his love, before the magic tore them apart. She hit the ground hard. The glow faded from her skin. The silence that followed was unbearable. Ronan. No answer. Smoke drifted from the altar. He lay beside it, motionless, the dagger shattered beside his hand. She crawled to him, trembling. His chest was still. The mark over his heart was gone. The curse had broken. But so had he. She gathered him into her arms, rocking him like she had that first night. "No," she whispered. "You can't leave me now. You promised." The cave answered only with the drip of water. Have you ever held someone and felt the world fall quiet around you? That moment when love and loss become the same thing? When every heartbeat you have left belongs to them? The question burned through her tears as she pressed her face against his neck. Somewhere deep inside, the bond's rhythm faltered, then faded into silence. Elara stayed that way until the last of the fire died. Outside, dawn crept over the peaks, painting the snow in rose and gold, light too gentle for such an ending. When she finally looked up, the runes on the altar were dark, their power spent. But beneath her palm, on Ronan's chest, she thought she felt a single, faint beat.
Once.
Then again. Her breath caught. Ronan! His eyes didn't open, but his fingers twitched against hers, a whisper of movement, enough to keep hope alive. Elara closed her eyes, clutching his hand. "Hold on," she murmured. "Just hold on." The mountain had gone quiet after the fire. Ash drifted down from the ceiling of the cavern, glowing faintly before it vanished into the dark. Elara knelt beside Ronan's still body, her fingers laced with his. The warmth that had filled the bond was gone now, but something inside her refused to accept the silence. "No," she whispered, her voice raw. "You're not finished yet." The wound over his heart was clean. No mark, no curse, nothing left to hold him here. She pressed both hands to his chest and poured every bit of warmth she had left into the motion, the way she'd done for sick children in the village. But healing a cut was not the same as calling a soul back. This was beyond herbs, beyond skill. It demanded something greater. Blood binds. Love releases. The words from the altar pulsed through her mind. Maybe the fire hadn't meant for her to save him with magic at all. Maybe it wanted her to remember what had begun the bond in the first place, her choice to spend her last coins for a stranger. She bent over him, tears falling onto his skin. "I chose you once," she murmured. "I'll keep choosing you until you hear me." The cave gave no answer, only the soft hiss of cooling stone. Still, she stayed. Hours passed, perhaps longer, and at last, exhausted, she laid her forehead against his and closed her eyes. She let the quiet in. She let the grief rise. Beneath it, under the ache and the fear, she felt a thread of warmth, faint but alive, like the first spark under cold ashes. "Ronan," she whispered into the stillness, "if you can hear me, come back. You promised me the wild, remember? You promised to show me who I am." For a moment nothing happened. Then the air shifted. A breeze moved through the cavern though no wind should have reached this deep. The torch she'd left guttered, then flared brighter. And under her palms, a slow, heavy beat answered. Once.
Twice.
His chest rose, shallow but real. Elara gasped, half sobbing. "That's it. Come back to me." She pressed her hands harder. The faint light that had lived in her veins since the bond awoke stirred again, running from her wrists into his heart. It hurt, the same searing ache as before, but she didn't stop. Ronan's eyes flickered open, silver dulled to gray. "Elara?" She laughed through the tears. "You're stubborn." "So are you," he rasped. She helped him sit, her arms trembling under his weight. "The curse is gone," she said. "You're free." He looked down at their joined hands. And you. She followed his gaze. The light beneath her skin was dimmer now, not burning but glowing softly, like the steady warmth of an ember. Still here, she said. Maybe part of it stayed. Ronan touched her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear. Not curse, he said slowly. Gift. The words settled deep in her chest. Gift. He nodded. The bond made us mirror. I die, you call me back. You fall, I rise for you. Elara smiled faintly. Sounds exhausting. He laughed, weak but genuine, and the sound filled the cavern with something brighter than firelight. They stayed there until the storm outside faded, leaning against the stone wall. Ronan's head rested against hers, his breath warm at her temple. You saved me again, he said softly. I think we saved each other. Have you ever learned that strength doesn't come from power, but from who you choose to keep alive inside you? The thought rose in her mind like another heartbeat, steady and sure. When they finally stepped out of the cave, the world below was washed clean by rain. Mist rolled over the valley. The ruins of Ronan's keep shimmered faintly in the new light. Birds called from the cliffs, the first she had heard since the war began. Ronan turned to her, silver eyes reflecting the sunrise. It's quiet, he said. For now. He studied her face. You still mean to stay with me? She tilted her head. After everything? I think the choice was made long before either of us understood it. He smiled. Then we rebuild. My kin will return. You'll teach them your healing. I will teach them not to fear your kind again. Elara looked toward the horizon where the river glimmered like a ribbon of light. Somewhere beyond those hills the king's empire still ruled, but the pulse of that power felt smaller now, as if the breaking of the curse had cracked the spell that bound the land as well. She reached for Ronan's hand. The bond's light flared briefly between their fingers, warm, alive, no longer burning. Whatever happens next, she said, we face it together. Ronan squeezed her hand. Together. They walked down from the mountain in silence, the world unfolding green and wide before them. The air smelled of pine and rain and something like beginning. And deep inside, where their hearts met in the quiet rhythm that had survived everything, Elara knew the wild had claimed them both, not as curse, but as promise. They had not gone far from the mountain before the first horn sounded. The clear, metallic cry rolled down the valley, echoed by another, then another, until the entire forest seemed to vibrate with warning. Ronan's grip tightened around Elara's hand. They come, he said simply. Elara turned toward the sound. Through the mist she could see them, dozens of crimson-cloaked riders cutting through the trees, armor flashing like blood in sunlight. At their head rode a man in black and gold, the king's mage, the one she'd seen in her vision. Her stomach twisted. He knows about me. Ronan nodded. He smells the bond. He wants what's in your blood now. She drew a shaky breath. Then we end this here. They climbed to a ridge above the valley where the ground opened to the sky. The same clouds that had once hidden the moon now parted, and pale light spilled over the grass. Ronan stood beside her, shoulders squared, every inch the alpha he had been before chains and war. Stay behind me, he murmured. Elara shook her head. No more hiding. The first wave of soldiers broke through the trees. Ronan met them halfway, moving with inhuman speed. Steel clashed, sparks flew, and the sound echoed through the hills. Elara watched in awe and terror as he fought, not with rage, but with precision, each movement a memory of the wild itself. Then the mage raised his staff. A bolt of dark light struck Ronan in the chest, throwing him backward. He hit the ground hard, smoke rising from his skin. The soldiers closed in. Enough, Elara shouted. The air around her trembled. The mark on her wrist blazed, and the faint ember that had lingered since the altar roared to life. Light burst from her palms, a wash of silver fire that swept across the ridge. The soldiers stumbled, blinded. Only the mage stood firm, his voice cutting through the storm. "You bear the Alpha's gift," he hissed. "Give it to me, girl, and I'll spare your life." Elara felt the pulse of Ronan's heartbeat beneath her own, weak but present. "You'll have to kill me first." He smiled. "Gladly." The staff lifted again, gathering black fire. Elara threw up her hands instinctively, and the world exploded in light. When the smoke cleared, she stood unharmed. Around her, the grass smoldered where the bolt had struck, but she felt no pain. The glow from her hands had formed a shield, faintly translucent, shimmering with the same runes she'd seen on the bloodstone altar. The mage's eyes widened. "Impossible." Ronan stirred behind her. "Not impossible," he growled. "Destined." He forced himself to his feet, every movement a struggle. "The bond was never curse," he said to the mage. "It was Crown's fear made it so." Elara understood then. The bond's purpose wasn't to enslave, but to balance. One heart human, one heart wild, each keeping the other whole. She stepped forward, voice steady. "You tried to cage what you didn't understand, but the wild doesn't bow." The mage struck again, but this time she met his power with her own. Silver light and shadow collided, the sound like thunder. Ronan reached her side, adding his strength to hers. The bond flared between them, bright enough to rival the moon. Together they pushed, their joined hearts beating the rhythm of the earth itself. The black fire shattered, and the mage screamed as the light consumed him, dissolving into ash that the wind carried away. Silence followed, heavy, absolute. Elara dropped to her knees, trembling, the glow fading from her skin. Ronan knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms. "It's done," he whispered. She looked up at him, tears streaking her cheeks. "We did it." He smiled, the expression soft and weary. "You did. I only followed your light." The surviving soldiers fled down the valley, their armor clattering like distant rain. Above them the moon hung full and bright, unbroken for the first time in years. Elara rested her head against his shoulder. The rhythm in her chest matched his again, steady, even. For the first time since the auction, she felt peace. If love asked you to fight the whole world, would you stand and face it? Or would you run? The thought came not as fear but as wonder, and she already knew her answer. Ronan traced a finger along her jaw. "You are the heart of the wild now," he murmured. The balance it needed. She smiled through her exhaustion. "And you?" "I am yours." He kissed her then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that carries both victory and vow. Around them, the night wind rose, sweeping through the valley as if the land itself breathed again. Days passed before the valley remembered peace again. The smoke of battle drifted away, and the wind carried the scent of new rain and pine. Birds returned to the cliffs. The river below ran clear where blood had darkened it. High on the ridge, beneath the pale moon that had watched their war, Elara and Ronan built a fire, not for fighting, but for warmth. They didn't speak at first. There were no words large enough for what they had survived. Elara watched the flames twist and realized that, for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of them. Ronan sat beside her, his arm draped around her shoulders. The bond between them was quiet now, a pulse more felt than heard, like the steady beat of the earth underfoot. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked toward the horizon. "The king's mage is gone. Without him, the crown's hold weakens. My kin will return from the north. The land will heal itself." His gaze softened as it came back to her. But peace needs keepers, ones who remember what it costs. She smiled faintly. You mean us? You and me, he agreed. Alpha and Heart. Elara leaned against him, her fingers tracing the faint scar where the wound had been. You were right, she murmured. The bond was never a curse. He covered her hand with his. It was always the way home. For a long while they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of fire and the hush of wind through the grass. When dawn finally broke, painting the world in gold, Elara stood. Come with me, she said. He followed her down to the river. At its edge, she knelt and touched the water. The ripples glowed faintly under her fingers, as if the light inside her still spoke the language of the wild. Do you hear it? She asked. Ronan frowned. Hear what? The land, she said softly. It's waking. He crouched beside her, listening. Beneath the rush of the current, a low hum vibrated through the stones, a rhythm that matched their hearts. The same pulse that had bound them now threaded through the earth itself. Elara smiled. It remembers. When everything you love has been torn down, what do you build in its place? The thought came to her like the whisper of water over stone, and she already knew the answer. You build again. You plant. You heal. They rebuilt slowly. The villagers who had once feared her returned, drawn by whispers of light seen on the mountain and by the stories of the Alpha who had fought the king's men. Elara greeted them without judgment, offering herbs, food, safety. The old keep became a refuge, a place where the wounded could come without fear of chains or curse. Sometimes, at night, when the moon was full, the wild called again. Ronan would shift then, silver eyes bright in the dark, and the great wolf would run the ridges while Elara watched from the firelight. She never feared for him. The bond between them stretched far, but never broke. When he returned, he would lay his head in her lap, the same strength that had once frightened her now gentle under her hands. She'd stroke his fur and whisper, "Home," and he'd close his eyes, content. Years later, travelers who passed through the valley spoke of a healer who could call rain to parched fields and of a guardian wolf who walked beside her. They said that on certain nights, when the moon was highest, two figures could be seen at the riverbank, hand in hand, silver light twining around them like mist. And sometimes, when children asked who they were, the elders would answer, the ones who remembered what it means to belong, to each other and to the wild. Elara never corrected them. The names didn't matter. Only the heartbeat that still pulsed between them, strong and steady, proof that love was not meant to cage, but to set free. If the wild called you now, offering a bond that could break every rule but heal every wound, would you answer it? Would you spend your last coin for a stranger, knowing that choice might save you both? One night, many seasons later, Elara stood alone at the river while the moon rose full and clear. The wind stirred her hair. The water shimmered like silver glass. Behind her, Ronan's voice came quiet and warm. Still listening? She smiled. Always. He stepped close, wrapping his arms around her waist. What does it say? She tilted her head, listening to the hum beneath the current. It says the world remembers love longer than fear. He kissed her temple. Then we have done enough. They stood together until the moon reached its peak, and the river carried their reflections downstream, two lights moving as one, fading only when the water turned to stars.